August 5th, 2023, 11:23 p.m. A desperate phone call comes into Harford County Police. After Rachel failed to return home from her walk and didn't contact anyone, her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, reported her missing. What Richard Tobin didn't know was that while he was frantically searching parking lots and calling Rachel's phone, her body was already growing cold in a drainage ditch just 150 feet from where hundreds of people jog every day. And what will shock you most? The man who brutally murdered his girlfriend had been living and working in the exact same community where Rachel raised her 5 children. For 9 months after killing her, he served food to her neighbors, worked alongside people who knew her name, and gave absolutely no indication that he was one of America's most wanted fugitives. Watch the video till the end, because this was not just a single murder but part of a series of far more sinister murders and crimes connected to the same monster, and it shows how difficult it was for investigators to find the killer. Rachel Morin was a 37-year-old mother of 5 children ranging from 8 to 23 years old. She worked as a medical assistant while balancing the demands of raising her large family in Harford County, Maryland. Rachel was known throughout her community for her unwavering dedication to fitness and her commitment to creating a stable, loving home for her children. After surviving difficult relationships in her past, Rachel had found her strength through exercise and independence. The Ma and Pa Trail had become her sanctuary, a scenic, paved pathway that winds through the peaceful suburbs of Harford County, where families felt completely safe exercising outdoors at any hour. Rachel jogged this route religiously, usually in the evenings after finishing her work shifts and handling family responsibilities. She was a creature of habit who followed the same patterns, took the same routes, and always maintained contact with family members about her whereabouts and expected return times. On August 5th, 2023, Rachel followed what appeared to be her completely normal routine. She drove to the William Street parking area at the trail entrance, just as she had done countless times before. Multiple witnesses would later confirm seeing Rachel on the trail that evening, appearing relaxed, confident, and following her usual jogging pattern. She waved to families walking their dogs, nodded to other joggers, and gave absolutely no indication that she sensed any danger lurking in the woods around her. The Ma and Pa Trail was her safe space, a place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But sometime after 7 p.m., Rachel stopped responding to text messages and phone calls. Richard Tobin grew increasingly worried when she failed to return home at her expected time. Rachel was reliable, predictable, and never deviated from her promises about when she would be back. When Tobin drove to the trail and found Rachel's car still parked in the lot, he knew something was terribly wrong. By 11:23 p.m., when Tobin made that desperate call to police, Rachel had already been dead for hours. August 6, 2023. After an extensive search involving K-9 units, helicopters, and dozens of community volunteers, Rachel's body is discovered in a drainage culvert approximately 150 feet from the main trail, hidden beneath dense brush where her screams couldn't have been heard by passing joggers or families. The crime scene tells an absolutely horrifying story. This wasn't where Rachel was initially attacked. The evidence shows she had been ambushed on the main trail, then dragged through thick underbrush and rough terrain to an isolated location where her attacker could assault her without being detected by anyone. The physical evidence indicates Rachel fought desperately and courageously for her life. There were clear signs of a prolonged, violent struggle, defensive wounds on her hands and arms, and torn clothing that suggested she had clawed and fought against her attacker with everything she had. Most importantly for the investigation that would follow, Rachel had managed to get her attacker's DNA under her fingernails during her desperate fight for survival. This genetic evidence would become the key to solving one of Maryland's most horrific and complex murder cases. The autopsy reveals the full scope of the horror that Rachel endured in her final moments. She had been brutally sexually assaulted, beaten with tremendous force, and ultimately strangled to death. The medical examiner determined that the attack had lasted at least 30 minutes, meaning Rachel had suffered through an unimaginable ordeal of terror and pain. But investigators discovered something that would completely change the scope of their investigation. DNA evidence was collected from multiple locations on Rachel's body, her clothing, and her personal belongings. However, when the genetic profile was uploaded to Maryland's criminal database, there were absolutely no matches. This meant Rachel's killer was either a complete first-time offender or someone from outside the state's jurisdiction entirely. What investigators didn't know was that the same DNA signature was already sitting in a crime lab database 3,000 miles away, waiting for someone to make the connection that would blow this case wide open. Sheriff Jeffrey Gahler makes a promise to the media and Rachel's family. "We will find Rachel's killer. We will use every resource at our disposal, and we will make sure he never hurts another innocent person." What he doesn't know is that the killer is already planning his next move. March 26, 2023, 5 months before Rachel's murder, and exactly 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, California, a 9-year-old girl and her mother are brutally attacked during a violent home invasion. The perpetrator sexually assaults both victims before fleeing into the night, leaving behind a trail of trauma and terror. The Los Angeles Police Department collects DNA evidence from the crime scene and uploads the genetic profile to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, the national database used to connect crimes across state lines. For months, there are absolutely no matches. The case goes cold while the victims try to rebuild their shattered lives and cope with their trauma. August 15, 2023. 10 days after Rachel's murder, Maryland investigators upload the unknown DNA profile from Rachel's crime scene to the same federal database. What happens next changes everything about both investigations and reveals the true scope of the monster they're hunting. Within hours, they get a hit that transforms both cases. The case made headlines across the country with DNA evidence from Morin's death connected to the assault of a child and her mother in Los Angeles in 2023. The DNA from Rachel Morin's murder scene was an exact match to the DNA from the Los Angeles home invasion. Let this sink in for a moment. The same predator who had terrorized a mother and young daughter in California had somehow traveled across the entire country and murdered Rachel Morin in Maryland. This wasn't a local killer who had snapped in a moment of rage. This was a calculated predator operating on a national scale. But investigators quickly realized the scope extends even further than two horrific crimes. FBI analysts begin cross-referencing the DNA profile with other unsolved violent crimes across the country. This genetic signature appears to be connected to additional attacks in multiple states, suggesting they were dealing with someone who had been systematically targeting and destroying innocent lives for an extended period of time. The suspect profile begins to emerge through witness descriptions and crime scene analysis. Hispanic male, approximately 20 to 30 years old, 5'9", 160 pounds, with a muscular build and dark hair. But beyond this basic physical description, investigators still have no name, no address, no employment history, and absolutely no idea where to find their suspect. The FBI launches a nationwide manhunt for one of America's most dangerous predators. What they don't know is that their suspect has been hiding in plain sight in the very community where he committed his most heinous crime. September 2023 through May 2024, FBI genealogy experts take complete control of the investigation, applying cutting-edge forensic techniques that had never before been used on a case of this magnitude and complexity. They upload the killer's DNA profile to public genealogy databases like 23andMe and Ancestry, searching for distant relatives who might have unknowingly submitted their own genetic information for ancestry research. For 8 grueling months, the investigation seems to stall completely. The DNA clearly indicates Hispanic or Latino ancestry, but the genetic matches are too distant to pinpoint specific family lines, geographic locations, or even general regions where the suspect might have originated. Meanwhile, federal investigators believe their suspect remains active and is potentially committing additional violent crimes while completely evading law enforcement across multiple jurisdictions. The pressure to solve Rachel's case intensifies as her family demands answers and the community lives in fear. Then, in early 2024, they achieve their first major breakthrough that completely changes the trajectory of the investigation. A genealogy match leads FBI agents to coordinate directly with international law enforcement authorities in Central America, opening up entirely new possibilities for suspect identification. What they discover is absolutely chilling and explains how their suspect had managed to evade detection for so long. Victor Martinez-Hernandez had entered the United States illegally from his native El Salvador. where he was accused of murdering a woman in December of 2022. Martinez-Hernandez was already a wanted fugitive for murder when he crossed into the United States. He had fled his home country specifically to avoid facing charges for the brutal killing of a young woman, and had been living illegally in America while committing additional violent crimes against innocent victims. The timeline becomes terrifyingly clear. Martinez-Hernandez illegally crosses the border in early 2023, commits the Los Angeles assault in March, travels across the country throughout the spring and summer, and murders Rachel Morin in August, all while being a wanted international fugitive who should never have been free to hurt anyone. But investigators still face their most critical challenge. Where exactly is Martinez-Hernandez now? Federal databases show no legal employment records, no official addresses, no credit card transactions, no bank accounts. He had essentially vanished completely into America's undocumented immigrant community. While FBI agents conduct extensive searches for Victor Martinez-Hernandez across multiple states and coordinate with international databases, the shocking truth is slowly revealed through witness interviews and employment record analysis. Martinez-Hernandez had been living and working in Bel Air, Maryland, the exact same community where he had brutally murdered Rachel Morin. His friends, family, and coworkers testified that he was in Bel Air in August 2023 while working at Barrett's on the Pike and Popeye's restaurants, before leaving Maryland in May 2024. For 9 complete months after murdering Rachel Morin, Martinez-Hernandez maintained a totally normal life in the same neighborhoods where his victim had raised her 5 children. He served food to Rachel's neighbors, worked alongside people who may have known her name, attended local community events, and gave absolutely no indication that he was a wanted fugitive connected to violent crimes spanning multiple states. Restaurant coworkers and managers described Martinez-Hernandez as quiet, reliable, and completely unremarkable in every way. He showed up for his shifts on time, performed his assigned duties without any complaints, followed all workplace rules, and blended seamlessly into the local workforce of food service establishments throughout Harford County. But Martinez-Hernandez was systematically living under multiple false identities. He used stolen social security numbers, fabricated immigration documents, and fake employment references to secure jobs at local businesses. He worked primarily for cash payments when possible and never stayed at any single job location long enough for employers to conduct thorough background investigations or ask detailed questions about his past. The most chilling reality for Rachel's devastated family. Martinez-Hernandez had been working at restaurants that they almost certainly frequented on a regular basis. Barrett's on the Pike and Popeyes were popular local establishments where Rachel and her children may have eaten dozens of times over the years, creating a horrifying possibility that the killer and his victim's family had directly interacted multiple times after the murder. During this entire 9-month period, Martinez-Hernandez was also staying with extended family members who had absolutely no idea they were harboring and protecting one of America's most wanted fugitives. Jose and Tanya Hernandez, Victor's cousins, would later testify that he had been living in their home, attending family gatherings, and participating in normal social activities while Rachel's family grieved her loss. In May 2024, Martinez-Hernandez suddenly disappeared from Maryland without any warning to his employers, co-workers, or family members. What they didn't know was that he had fled because FBI investigators were finally closing in on his true identity and exact location. June 2024. After months of intensive genealogy analysis and international coordination, FBI experts achieve the definitive breakthrough that cracks Rachel Morin's case wide open. They positively identify Victor Antonio Martinez-Hernandez as the source of DNA found at both the Maryland murder scene and the Los Angeles home invasion, finally putting a name and face to their most wanted suspect. Federal agents immediately mobilized teams to locate Martinez-Hernandez at all of his known addresses in Maryland, but they discover that he had vanished without a trace several weeks earlier. None of his employers, co-workers, or family members know where he went, and he left behind no forwarding addresses or contact information. A comprehensive nationwide manhunt begins involving multiple federal agencies, state police departments, and local law enforcement jurisdictions. FBI wanted posters featuring Martinez-Hernandez's photograph are distributed to construction companies, restaurants, agricultural businesses, and other employers known to hire undocumented workers. Police said they arrested Victor Antonio Martinez-Hernandez on June 14, 2024 in connection with the 2023 homicide of Rachel Morin. The breakthrough comes from a completely unexpected source. A construction worker in Tulsa, Oklahoma recognizes Martinez-Hernandez from FBI wanted posters that were circulating widely on social media platforms. Victor Martinez-Hernandez has been arrested in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for the August murder of Rachel Morin. Martinez-Hernandez had been working under yet another false identity at a residential construction site in Oklahoma, living in temporary housing with other undocumented workers and maintaining the exact same low-profile existence that had allowed him to successfully evade capture for over a year. Federal agents coordinate with Tulsa police to carefully plan Martinez-Hernandez's arrest. They surrounded the construction site during the morning shift change, when workers were arriving for their daily assignments. None of the other workers had any idea they were about to witness the arrest of one of America's most wanted fugitives for murder. Martinez-Hernandez is taken into custody without any incident whatsoever. He offers no resistance, doesn't attempt to flee, doesn't ask for a lawyer, and shows absolutely no emotion as federal agents place him under arrest for Rachel Morin's murder. His complete lack of reaction chills the investigating officers who had spent nearly a year hunting him. The search of Martinez-Hernandez's personal belongings reveals disturbing evidence suggesting he had been systematically moving between construction jobs across multiple states, always staying ahead of law enforcement and always maintaining the same pattern of using false identities and working for cash. Sheriff Jeffrey Gahler immediately contacts Rachel's family with the news they had been desperately waiting to hear. After nearly 11 months of intensive investigation, Rachel Morin's killer was finally in custody. But the most shocking revelations about how investigators had tracked him down were yet to be revealed. June 2024. News of Martinez-Hernandez's arrest brings both overwhelming relief and renewed trauma to Rachel Morin's surviving family members. Her 5 children, who had been struggling to rebuild their lives after losing their mother in such a horrific and senseless manner, now faced the prospect of reliving their worst nightmare through a very public and highly publicized trial. The family's grief has been enormously complicated by intense media attention and the deliberate politicization of Rachel's murder by various groups. Her case became an immediate lightning rod in heated national debates about immigration policy, border security, and law enforcement, with politicians and political commentators using Rachel's death to advance their own agendas rather than focusing on justice for her family. Rachel's mother, Patty Morin, emerged as the primary spokesperson for the family during this impossible period, advocating tirelessly for justice while simultaneously trying to shield her vulnerable grandchildren from the overwhelming media circus. She repeatedly emphasized that Rachel should be remembered as a loving mother, dedicated community member, and fitness enthusiast, not as a political symbol or talking point. The impact on Rachel's 5 children has been absolutely devastating in ways that extend far beyond normal grief. Since their mother's murder, the children have been placed with their respective fathers and other relatives, their entire world structure completely altered by Martinez-Hernandez's violence. The youngest child was only 8 years old when their mother was killed, barely old enough to understand why she would never come home again. April 1, 2025. Victor Martinez-Hernandez, 24, appears in Harford County Circuit Court as his trial for Rachel Morin's murder officially begins. The prosecution, led by State's Attorney Allison Healy, presents what they describe as absolutely overwhelming evidence linking Martinez-Hernandez directly to Rachel's brutal murder through irrefutable scientific analysis. The evidence presented to the jury includes DNA analysis showing Martinez-Hernandez's genetic material recovered from multiple locations on Rachel's body, clothing, and personal belongings. Comprehensive timeline reconstruction showing Martinez-Hernandez's presence in the Maryland area during the time of the murder. Digital evidence and cell phone data connecting him definitively to both the Maryland murder and the Los Angeles assault. Detailed witness testimony from family members, co-workers, and community members who had unknowingly harbored him for months. Throughout the entire trial, Martinez-Hernandez shows no visible emotion whatsoever. He sits completely silently as prosecutors present graphic details about the horrific nature of Rachel's final moments, the devastating impact her murder had on her 5 children, and the terror she must have experienced during her prolonged attack. The prosecution's case is built on absolutely irrefutable scientific evidence. DNA analyst testimony reveals that Martinez-Hernandez's genetic material was found on Rachel's wrist, neck, and Apple Watch, with statistical analysis showing that the probability of this DNA belonging to someone else is essentially zero, approximately 1 in 870 trillion. The defense team faces what legal experts describe as a nearly impossible task. The defense rested their case in less than 10 minutes, having essentially no viable strategy to counter the overwhelming physical evidence, Martinez-Hernandez's documented history of violence across multiple jurisdictions, and the clear pattern of predatory behavior established through the prosecution's case. The jury found Martinez-Hernandez guilty on all counts: first-degree premeditated murder, first-degree rape, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The swift verdict reflects the completely overwhelming nature of the evidence against him and the clarity of his guilt. August 11, 2025. As Victor Martinez-Hernandez begins serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole, federal investigators finally reveal the most shocking detail about how they were able to track him down and build their case, a detail that completely changes your understanding of how this impossible case was actually solved. Here's the question that's haunted this entire investigation. What happens when the breakthrough that solves an impossible murder case comes from the killer's own family members, who unknowingly handed over the evidence that would send him to prison for life? The answer will disturb you forever. While Martinez-Hernandez was living with his cousins Jose and Tanya Hernandez from December 2023 to May 2024, he was doing normal household activities, washing his clothes, using shared bathrooms, eating meals, and leaving behind traces of himself throughout their home. When FBI agents finally identified Martinez-Hernandez through genetic genealogy and obtained search warrants for the Hernandez family home, they collected clothing items and personal belongings that Martinez-Hernandez had left behind when he suddenly fled in May 2024. DNA from some of the clothing matched the DNA recovered from the crime scene, according to the charging documents in the case. The evidence was collected after investigators learned the suspect had been staying with his family in Maryland between December 2023 and May 2024. Think about this devastating irony. Martinez-Hernandez's own family members, people who had welcomed him into their home, shared their meals with him, provided him with shelter and support, unknowingly provided the DNA evidence that would conclusively prove he was Rachel Morin's killer. Jose and Tanya Hernandez had no idea they were harboring a murderer. They thought they were helping a family member who needed work and housing. But their simple act of doing laundry and maintaining their household provided investigators with the evidence they needed to definitively link Martinez-Hernandez to Rachel's murder. The family who had been protecting him became the key to his conviction. The very people who had given him a place to hide became the unwitting instruments of justice for Rachel Morin. Our condolences to the victims and their families. Subscribe for more true crime stories.